Nobody had any idea where I was or what I was doing.
That is freaking stunning.
I should share.
And a piece of cat hair just flew into my eye.
So walking across like this.
What's old Limpy called?
Limpy.
What lenses should I take? Take all of them.
I very nearly got a Darwin Award.
That's nice.
Okay, so now I put my foot in it.
Merry Christmas, probably, everyone.
Wappa! Hi everybody and welcome back to episode 5 of the Safari Shots podcast, and today we're going to be talking about arguably the best game reserve for wildlife photography on the African continent. And as always, I've got with me Lance van der Vyver. Lance, how you doing, man?
Yeah, good yourself.
Oh, it's going really well, man. We've been all over the world since we last spoke. You've been in Switzerland, I've been in the Kalahari, you've been in Mashatu, that we're going to be talking about now. How's life back in the hood?
Yeah. It's actually nice to finally be home. Yeah, we've been, like you say, Switzerland, Mashatu, Sabi Sand, Timbavati. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but now we're done for the year. Merry Christmas, probably, everyone, by the time this comes out. And yeah, ready to hoist some pods.
Yeah, it's great to be back, guys. And, you know, the reason that we've been away for so long is exactly that. We've been traveling a lot. But as we said before, we're going to use every opportunity we get to chat to you guys on the Safari Shots podcast. And before we talk about Mashatu, and we're going to delve into it in quite detail, there's a little sort of formality that we've just got to sort of get to. And that is the first trophy announcement or handover. That one. It's basically the trophy for the best photograph taken in monopools by one of us, as voted by you. And it was actually very close, hey Lance, like it's such a close contest. You had about 5 million votes and I think I had 1.5.
Shame, and they voted for the photo that you didn't submit.
Yeah, I know, right? So overwhelmingly, Lance won the trophy. So Lance, congratulations, there it is.
Thank you.
I must be honest with you. This one actually doesn't sting at all, and I'll tell you why. It's because I actually got a trophy of my own. It looks like this. So for those of you that want to see, so I have it on good authority that Lance, you know, being born a Kiwi, still supports the All Blacks. So I think it's, yeah, I don't feel too bad, you know.
Yeah, I've decided now that I've been here 12 years, it's time to move over. So go Bokke.
Yep, there we go. That's what I wanted to hear. Guys, what we're going to do by the end of this episode, because we enjoyed all your votes and your comments on our 2 photographs from Monopool so much, we're actually going to have another vote in this episode. So Lance, I know you've got one ready already. I've got one as well. I've learned a lot from that first challenge. We are basically going to get you to vote for the best Mashatu photograph as taken by us. Could be of anything as long as it was taken on a photographic safari in Mashatu. So stay tuned for that. But let's jump straight in, Lance. Let's talk a little bit about Mashatu Game Reserve. And before I ask you the first question, let me quickly tell the viewers exactly where it is. Mashatu Game Reserve is a massive 30,000 hectare private game reserve in the eastern tip of Botswana. So basically in an area called the Tuli block. So for those of you that live in South Africa or know South Africa, it's essentially about a 5 to 6 hour drive north of Johannesburg and Pretoria. So it's actually very well located, Lance, and it's part of the reason why I love the reserve so much. It's very easy to get to.
Yes. It's funny because in the intro you also gave away one of my main lines on Mashatu, and that I genuinely think it's one of the best photographic destinations in Africa, the whole of Africa. Yeah. Unless you're looking for something really specific like rhino or buffalo, which they don't have. If it's anything big cat related, elephant related, small animal related, landscape related, dramatic related, Mashatu honestly offers everything, and it is incredible. I've never been and not come back with amazing pictures from Mashatu.
I think that's part of the reason why Mashatu is a little bit underrated, or maybe not as well known, or as popular for that matter, is for the reason that it doesn't have the big 5. So as Lance just said, they don't have rhinos there and they don't have buffalo there. But plenty of lion, great cheetah sightings, one of the best places in Africa to photograph leopards. And without a shadow of a doubt, one of the best places to photograph elephants. And not only photograph
100%.
elephants, but also to experience elephants and spend quality time with big herds of elephants. So that basically, you started answering my first question. And what I wanted to ask you was, why do you like it so much? Like, what is it about Mashatu that makes you want to go there as opposed to the Sabi Sands or the Okavango Delta or any of these other places that are perhaps a bit more famous?
Yeah, so I'm biased because I'm a photographer. So, I mean, this kind of goes for all safari goers, but as a photographer, I'm especially biased towards Mashatu. And that's basically because it's just so unique. The landscape is amazing. It's very arid, so you hardly ever get grass in front of you. We've all been to a place where we've had an amazing photo opportunity until you get a stick or a piece of grass like this in front of an animal. You hardly get that at Mashatu because it is so dry. Like Philia was saying, you've got eye-level hides, so one of the original ones in Africa where you can sit and be surrounded by hundreds of elephants and you are literally this close to them. I've been many occasions where I've been sprayed head to toe with mud from elephants where they've sprayed me through their legs. The lions are fantastic. The lions are actually getting better now because the pride dynamics have changed. So it used to be small individual prides. Now the prides are actually growing quite big. And in my opinion, it is the best place in southern Africa, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this, to photograph leopards. We do a lot of Sabi Sands trips, which has to be definitely second. But honestly, for leopards, Mashatu is the place. And it's not just because they're very relaxed, very habituated, but because of the landscape. You get them in riverbeds, you get them on trees, you get them walking through the open, you get them in forests, you get them in bush. So your portfolio in a small amount of time in one place can be huge. Whereas Sabi Sands, where the leopards are also fantastic, your portfolio is often very similar. Leopard,
I think that's exactly
lots of bush, so it's either tight shots. Yeah, whereas
Walking in the
Mashatu, you can
road.
go as wide as you want and still get clean. Yes, lots of road. You hardly see roads in Mashatu because the whole place is kind of a road.
Yeah, I think what Lance means by that is that it's so open that the guys off-road, I would say, a lot more than you do in the Sabi Sands. In the Sabi Sands, you typically stick to a road
100%,
network,
yeah.
and only if tracks go off-road or you spot an animal off-road, you drive into the bush, and then you'll know it's a lot of bundu bashing where you have to drive very slowly and carefully over or around things. Whereas in Mashatu, because it's completely open, if you see something there, you literally just drive there. You know, it's extremely easy to off-road. And again, as Lance said, with very, very good visibility. So I have found that over the years, and all the years that I've gone, leopard sightings tend to be even better in the dry season when there's hardly any grass and when tracking is exceptionally easy, because the Tuli means land of the dust. Tuli means dust. So it is basically the land of dust. And that means that finding leopard tracks and following leopard tracks in Mashatu is that much easier than it would be in a place like the Sabi Sands.
Yeah, but we've had that trip before. So Philia and myself have both guided at the same time there. And we had that trip in green season, yellow season, where we went for yellow flowers. And we saw, 7 leopards in one drive? Yeah. We eventually went and had a sundowners to get away from them, and one joined us at sundowners. And that was in a season where you cannot track. We just managed to find 7 in a single drive. So,
well, I think the reason for that is, and what Lance means by yellow season as opposed to green season, Mashatu is a very unique area where when it rains enough, and this is typically any time from November, but usually more into January, February, when it rains enough, an arid area like that has what's called a devil's thorn flush. So it's a little sort of creeper with a horrible thorn, the devil's thorn, that makes a beautiful yellow flower. And it makes it in millions. So if it rains enough and it keeps raining, that whole open area that we just spoke about, and in Mashatu they call it the central area and down towards the Vlei, gets absolutely covered in yellow. And when I say covered in yellow, I'm talking like Namaqualand. And again, because it's covered in sort of a relatively low layer of flowers, not extremely tall grass, it means that it might not be as easy to track, but you still have great visibility. And the cool thing is, all the different animals actually walk through those flowers. Lion, leopard, cheetah, elephants eat the flowers, wildebeest, zebra. I've seen vultures in the flowers. You name it. Everything goes to those yellow flowers. And it just makes for the most incredible photographs. Baboons, eating flowers in
One
the
of the
backlight.
best places to photograph baboons, also in Botswana.
Yeah.
Actually, probably Africa.
Well, I think the reason for that is because those troops of baboons are so relaxed. Mashatu's baboons are not the kind that raid camps. And it means that when you go out on game drive, you can literally drive into a troop of baboons, photograph in front light, backlight, whatever you choose, and really get those kind of antics that you wouldn't necessarily get elsewhere where they're a little bit more nervous. And I love those opportunities when you actually get to the Matabole riverbed where there's a little bit of water and you get them jumping across or walking across like this through the water. It's it's a highlight on any photographic safari that you go there, is to spend a morning or an afternoon with a troop of baboons.
That was actually one of my biggest disappointments one time. So we had a safari, 2016 maybe. We had the most amazing fallen over tree in the Matabole River. The baboons used to roost next to it, so not in it, but next to it, up on the riverbank. And they would play on this tree at sunset. So you'd go and backlight it, and you get all these baboons eye level with the most amazing glow in the fur. So we went back the next year, and I told all the guests about it. There's this really cool tree, and blah, 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 blah. And we got there, and the river had flooded, and the tree was gone.
It washed away. It's interesting because they've got this amazing riverbed, the Matabole riverbed, and it's not a perennial river. It only flows for certain parts of the year, but the water table's very high, so the elephants can dig water in it all the time. So that means there's always certain places along the Matabole where the animals drink. But what's so wonderful about it, unlike, say, the Sand River in the Sabi Sands, in a place like Mala Mala and Londolozi, where you have these amazing sightings, in Mashatu, it's that much easier to drive along the Matabole. And in fact, most of the time you actually drive inside it.
I've never done a safari where we haven't driven in there.
Yeah, even in summer you can drive big portions of it. And it's got steep edges, it's got dark sand as opposed to white sand, and then these colossal Mashatu trees, or Nyala trees as they're also known here in South Africa, that are just not only the most beautiful backdrops, but great places for leopards. They love those massive Mashatu trees in the branches.
Absolutely.
And make for some of the best photographs you can get of leopards anywhere in Africa, without a shadow of a doubt. Lance, so earlier you mentioned the photographic eye-level hide. For those of you that don't know, it was the original eye-level hide as far as I know, and it was designed by Shem Kompion of C4 Photo Safaris. And I remember when he first designed it, we went and we had a coffee. We met each other at Mashatu, and because I was working at Mashatu at that stage, he invited me for coffee just to sort of bounce a few ideas around. And I remember his original drawings and about the different places they could potentially build it. And what he had done was to sit down with some of the senior guides at Mashatu who had been there for 20 plus years to figure out which are the routes that the elephants use on a daily basis in the reserve. So obviously when you build an underground hide, you've got to make sure that there's water, it faces the right direction, that it's close enough to the camps, etc., etc. And they managed to find a spot close to Moddergat, which is a mud hole in Mashatu, where they built what I think is one of the best underground hides in Africa. Even though it was the original one, and you always make mistakes and learn from mistakes, I think they planned it so well that it has delivered, and it's since become definitely one of the best hides that you can sit and photograph animals at eye level. Yeah,
that's right. So, I mean, it has evolved over the years. It began as a single shipping container, and now it has grown. It's 2 shipping containers. The inside's got a little bit nicer. So they used to have fold down windows, which became your bench. Now it's just it's a nicer bench. The windows still fold up and down and things. So that it has evolved over the years, but the actual hole with the background and the cleared area has stayed the same because they nailed that part. And what makes it so special, not only the fact that the animals walk there, like Philia said, on a daily basis, is because the background is so far away that when you have animals drinking on that water's edge, you can blur the background completely with the long lens. It is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, to give you an idea, it's basically, like Lance said, there's 2 shipping containers, so there is space for 8 people to sit next to each other quite comfortably. And the waterhole is probably the size of, let's call it a small swimming pool. And I think it's about 12 to 15 meters across to the other side. So that means if you're photographing with something like 100 to 400, 100 to 500, you can easily get a a herd of kudus, but also a relatively nice close-up of a parrot or a green pigeon or something like that comes down to drink. The elephants, however, when they come in big herds, you're going to need something a little bit wider, maybe something like a 24 to 105 or a 24 to 70, or sometimes even a full wide angle lens to get the sky in as well. But you can get the most incredible variety of shots just from that one position.
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't been before and who's going, I would recommend, that's one of the questions you always get, right? What lenses should I take? Take all of them. If you have access to a super wide angle, like a 12 mil or a 10 mil, take it. Because even when the elephants are close, even 24 mil is often way too narrow of a field of view when they are right here. I mean, they're big animals. I've used 500 before in there. It's perfect for birds and small animals on the far side, like jackals, steenboks, which don't drink, but we saw drink last time. Last time we used an 800 mil in the hide, which is also really nice for small birds. They have a number of small birds that come throughout the whole day. But yeah, for the elephants, I would even recommend, if you can get your hands on something as wide as a 10 or a 12 mil, absolutely go for it. That new Canon 10 to 22 or whatever it is, I've got my eyeball on that one specifically for elephants and hides.
What I always notice when guests join me there for the first time, whenever the first herd of elephant comes in, they're so overwhelmed emotionally that they don't actually take a lot of photographs because they don't know which lens to pick up, and they just want to watch and listen and experience. So I think one of the top tips that I can give people that do go to Mashatu is, and you can agree or disagree with me, Lance, but I think it's always worthwhile to do more than one hide session. So go to Mashatu for long enough and book yourself 2, 3, or ideally even 4 hide sessions, maybe 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, because the light is slightly different. And also the elephants tend to approach from different directions. In the mornings, they tend to come from the right as they come from the higher lying areas where they slept during the night. And then in the afternoons, they tend to come from the front because the hide faces towards the central area where they feed. So the kind of photographs that you get in the morning and the afternoon differ slightly. So definitely give yourself enough time to see those elephants. And it's not just about elephants, it's also about the birds, and if you're lucky, predators and baboons and all those other animals. And I've just learned over the years, if you go and you only book one session, it really becomes a little bit more of a coin toss. And you only need those elephants to come in once to have those amazing opportunities.
Yeah. So one of the other big things as well is, depending on your time of year, you'll have more or less chance of this. But if you get a bad weather day, that things don't come. So we've had days in the middle of October where it's supposed to be really, really hot, where a cold front comes in, and then it's almost drizzling rain. You don't tend to see much. I've had days in July where it's not supposed to rain at all, and all of a sudden a funny cold front comes in, and then you have a miserable day and you don't see much. But it is, so definitely one is not enough. We were very lucky. So my last safari I've just returned from, we did 9 nights in Mashatu, and we had 5 hide sessions. And the guys actually said, we'll keep the 5, but after 2 or 3, we probably won't go back again. We went back every 5 because they were that good. And oddly, every hide session on this trip was very different. The first day we had amazing antelope. I can't even remember how many antelope species we had, but basically all of them. We had giraffes drinking, we had zebras, we had kudu, we had eland, we had wildebeest, we had jackals coming in. We had a couple of elephants, which was really nice towards the end. The next sessions we had lions drinking, which is a huge one for me. I'd always wanted lions and never got them. That afternoon, lions drinking again with elephants, a few more elephants. And then the last hide session, when we were the pressure was off. We had one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had. The weather was crap. So if that was our only hide session, we probably would have been really disappointed. We saw absolutely nothing for the first 3 hours, except for a couple of doves trying to get to the waterhole, but kind of got blown away. It was insane. We had this wind that was horrendous. We were lucky we were in the hide, we were protected from the wind. And we had kind of got to the point where we had just said, well, we've had an amazing time so far. Let's just enjoy sitting in here and not being in the wind. And about 3.5 hours into the session, all of a sudden about 150 elephants turned up.
Wow.
And bear in mind, this is our last hide. We had already had elephants every day, but it was the most surreal experience, the way they turned up and the interaction and the quality of the sighting and how close they were. And they all had teeny little babies.
Wow.
We honestly, we didn't talk for about 2 hours. They didn't leave. They just stayed around and we didn't talk. We just took photos. Looking around, I think all of us had tears in our eyes. It was just weird.
I'm getting goose flesh just as you're talking about it.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And I took a photo that I wanted to enter into Wildlife Photography of the Year this year, and then I forgot to enter, and it closed.
Oh no!
So maybe next year.
Well, it's very important, the things that you're talking about now, because I think timing is everything. It's not only about giving yourself enough sessions, but it's also making sure that if you want to go for the hide specifically, that you go the right time of the year. So I've been going to the hide right from the start. So I've sort of seen the yearly cycles for the last decade now. And what I've noticed is that if you go too early in the year, let's say even up to May, it's a little bit more hit and miss, because if it was a very wet season and there's a lot of water in the Matabole or Matabole rivers, it's not quite as active. But elephant sightings seem to pick up a little bit more from June, and then I find that in July and August, it's the best. And then from September and October onwards, it tends to go down a little bit and become a little bit more luck of the draw again. And I think the main reason for it is, what you have to remember is that the main food source of the elephants is the mupani leaves. And as those mupani trees lose their leaves, the herds tend to do a local migration down to the Limpopo River or the Shashi River. And there's just not as much elephant activity around the hide as there usually would be. So if I ever wanted to give someone advice, June, July, and especially August, I found is the best.
Yeah. So that's actually one of the reasons we had very few elephants this time. So we went in September. They had a horrendous dry year. Yeah. There wasn't a single leaf on a single mopani. And there was no elephants. The first 3 days we drove around, we didn't see elephants. We saw a couple right at night kind of disappearing. And then in the first couple of hide sessions, which were quite into the safari, we literally had 2 or 3 bulls and then 2 or 3 cows. And it was only on that last hide session where we had the couple of 100 elephants come around us, which is interesting because I would say it's one of my better hide sessions. But like I say, if you'd only had one and you'd gone the day before, we would have had none.
Well, you'll see me and Lance typically do that when we schedule our safaris to Mashatu. We either go for a dry season safari or a wet season safari. And if you go for the dry season, it's typically anytime from June to September with lots of hide sessions worked in between the game drives. Whereas when we do a wet season safari, for us it's typically in February because that's when we've had the most flowers. We would go with the hope of seeing those flowers. So even though there's no guarantee, we're going in the month that over the years, the trend has been that's giving us the best chance. And quite often, I don't know about you, Lance, but when I now go in February, I don't even book hide sessions because the felt is so beautiful and the hit rate so high out on drive that that risk that you take, sitting in the hide in the wet season, it's just not really worth it.
So we've actually got 2 safaris, 2 Mashatu next year, aiming for both of those things. We've got the February one, 15th to 19th of February, aiming for yellow flowers. No hide sessions booked. Just nice yellow flowers, leopards, lions, all that kind of good stuff. And then we have another one in June. I think it's the 29th of May, but up until June for hides. So that'll be hides and big cats and things like that. So
we'll make sure to link to those safaris in the video description on the Panthera Photo Safaris website. So if you guys are keen to join Lance next year, go and check those out. And I can strongly, strongly recommend that if it's something that you've seen or heard about, these yellow flowers, go for it. It's the most incredible safari if you get it right. You have to remember there's always this level of risk involved. Put it this way. I always say to people, if you want to photograph the yellow flowers, you have no choice. You have to take the risk. There's no other way to do it.
100%.
If you're going to go in April or May or June, it's just not going to happen. You have zero chance. Whereas if you book that safari and you go in February, at least you give yourself a chance. And the great thing about Mashatu is, even if it doesn't rain, it will deliver. It might look different to what you had hoped, but it's still going to deliver. So that's the great thing about those February or those summer safaris, is you're always giving yourself a chance, but it's going to be great irrespective of whether there are flowers or not.
Yeah. So our last green season, or our last yellow season, We didn't actually have yellow at all. Driving through the villages on the way to the reserve, that had a lot of rain, and we saw all the yellow flowers. We were like, yay, this is great. We got to the reserve. There wasn't a single yellow flower around. It had rained too early. They'd come out, they'd died.
That's rough.
The animals had eaten them. But we had cheetah almost every day. We had amazing leopard sightings. We had amazing lion sightings. So it was a really good safari. But obviously, if you'd come for yellow only, it might have been a little bit sore. But the photos we came away with were absolutely awesome. So
yeah, I was there in February for 11 days, and I was so lucky because there was a big cyclone that came through from sort of off the coast of Mozambique and then across Zimbabwe, and it was just bucketing down every single day of the safari. But luckily it was raining kind of as thunderstorms, so we were able to go out, park on a hill, watch the storm pass, and then still not miss our game drive. But what it meant was that not only did the flowers come out, every single day they doubled. So we literally watched the veld getting yellower, 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 and yellower. And we literally got every single animal that lives in Mashatu, we got in the yellow flowers. So one day we could literally just find a herd of elephants, and all we did was photograph them eating yellow flowers, close-ups of the trunk eating yellow flowers. I mean, there's nowhere else you can do it. That's the cool thing about it. There's nowhere else where you can
So the only other place I've seen yellow flushes like that is at Swalu, but of course they don't have elephants either. And it was also very localized.
Yeah.
No, so I've got wild dogs in yellow flowers, and I genuinely think that's the only photos I took of the yellow flowers, because it was tiny little patches along these sort of, what do they call them, the dune fields. So it's sort of little skinny long patches versus Mashatu when it happens. It's fields and fields and fields and these beautiful rolling yellow hills. I've actually heard a story before, and it's about this guy who used to work at Mashatu called Phileas Stain. It's actually one of my favorite stories of all time. I was wondering if you'd be able to possibly tell us the time there was an incident with a leopard trap.
It's arguably my favorite story to tell when I'm out with guests. You're 100% right. I did used to work in Mashatu. For those of you that don't know, I studied nature conservation, and I actually did my master's degree on leopard movements, and it happened to be in Mashatu specifically. So I was based at their main camp, as it used to be called, and we'll talk a little bit more about the different camps in a second. But I was essentially a young 21-year-old researcher living in camp, and I wasn't employed by the reserve, so nobody really cared what I was doing. I just had a permit to capture and collar leopards, track leopards, and then, basically do my research. And I had my own vehicle. So basically, the way that we captured these leopards was with a big cage. And, in it we would put a piece of meat, and then obviously it had a big trap door that has kind of a mouse trap like footplate at the back. But the problem was, every time I told the guides where I was trying to capture a specific leopard, they would go there with their guess, which is what I didn't want, because they were going to scare it away. And luckily, the study leopards was in a completely different area from the game viewing leopards. It was slightly shyer leopards in what I would used to call the Wild West. And I had this very specific female that I wanted to capture because her home range bordered my main study female, and hence I wanted to see what the overlap was. So anyways, one day I decided, let's go and try and catch her, set up the cage, set the trap, and lo and behold, the first night, her cub goes into the cage. So myself and the vet, well, what can we do? We've got to release it. So we drive up to the cage, open the door, and it had this big, heavy metal door that slams down, and we had a way to actually lift this thing. The cub goes under the car, runs away, growls at us. So we'd have to reset the trap. Long story short, for the next 4 nights, every night we would catch the cub instead of the mother. So obviously you can just imagine this was quite infuriating. On that last night, I reset the trap, we waited, and nothing happened. So eventually we just closed the trap door, went back to the lodge so that no warthog or baboon would go in the next morning. And our deal was basically we're going to give it one more night. But something happened the next day, and either I got busy or the vet got busy or whatever it was. But we called it off. And only a week later did I realize I never took the meat out of the cage. And what you have to understand, I had put this cage way off the road. I didn't tell a soul where it was. So it's for all practical purposes in the middle of nowhere. So I just jumped in my car and drove there. Nobody had any idea where I was or what I was doing. And as I approached this cage, I could smell that This was bad. This was as bad as I had expected. And as I walked close, I could see at the back of the cage was one big heap of maggots, literally crawling around at the back of the cage. So I open the trap door, lift it up, hook it in, crawl in on my knees, and as I bend down to cut the piece of rope that was now holding this alive piece of meat in, I just hear "Whoppa!" And basically I caught myself in my own trap. So I never released the trap door. And here I was on my knees with my face in a whole pile of maggots, unsure of whether I'll be able to lift the cage door from the inside. So
nobody knows where you are.
I very nearly got a Darwin Award. Imagine, that cage was actually built to capture lions and they can't get out. A big male lion can't get out of that cage. And all I had with me was a little multi-tool, a little Leatherman. So immediately I started thinking to myself, can I saw through this big diamond mesh? And obviously I was able to lift the cage door. But I think I was actually there for 4 years. And those 4 years were some of the best times I've ever spent in the bush. Not only because I had this freedom, but because it was Mashatu. I had the freedom of Mashatu. And it's actually very sad that those years, it was 2004 to 2007, you might remember, that's when digital photography only just became a thing. So I had a Canon 20D, sort of the second or third year that I was there. And I didn't even really know how to take wildlife photographs yet. So I had all these amazing opportunities. And yet it was a little bit before my time as a full-time wildlife photographer. But it's definitely where I kind of honed my skill and developed my love for wildlife photography. If it wasn't for Mashatu, I wouldn't be where I am now. And it's the main reason that I keep going back is because it feels like my second home.
No, it is. Honestly, it's one of the most special places. I mean, I've spent probably a 1 or 2% of the amount of times that you've spent there. And every single time I go back, I also feel like it's a second home. It's just such a magical place.
Some of the guides at Mashatu are, they have been there for literally close to 30 years. Guys like Richard and Dan at Tent Camp and Bashi and Kinosi and guys at some of the other camps. That just means that when you go out, us as photographic safari guides, we don't have to worry about what to find. Those guys are going to find something for us. And because they work with photographic safaris so often, a lot of the time you don't even have to tell them how to park. It means you can literally just focus on your clients and getting the shots that you want. So for me, and I know you do this as well, and that's something for you guys to keep in mind as well. If you go on a safari with me or Lance to Mashatu, is we will usually request a specific guide. And we know who the guides are that we get along with really well and that know the way that we operate and know the reserve really well. And I think for Mashatu, more than anywhere else, there are guides that I trust completely and that I just cannot wait to actually go out on drive with.
Yeah. So this trip now, this last 9-night safari we did, it was actually one of the most special safaris I've ever done anywhere. I think I already told you. It was my favorite safari in 12 years of guiding that I've ever done. And we had Kinosi, and the clients basically told me as we arrived, we've seen everything, so we're only focusing on leopards. And what a treat as a photographic guide. So we did 9 nights with the photo vehicle. Another reason Mashatu is so amazing, they've got a photographic vehicle. The sides are cut out so you can actually lie down and get eye level with the leopards while they're walking past you. It is absolutely incredible. So 9-night safari, only looking for leopards with 5 hide sessions included as well. And because of that, we got to basically drive around and have no pressure on us. We sat at certain trees for whole game drives because there was a leopard inside, no photo opportunity, but we knew when it would come down, it would be perfect. So we did that twice and it worked out perfectly twice. We had 2 or 3 game drives where we knew there was a cub sleeping in the bush and we could afford to sit there for a couple of hours and wait for it to come out. Whereas a lot of other reserves, you can't do that either. You go to other places, there's a leopard in that bush, but it's sleeping, you can't really see it. You've still got a timed safari. A lot of the times you've got 15 minutes, sometimes less, depending on the reserve, and then you have to leave for other vehicles to come in. Mashatu, they do share and you kind of still share, but there never seems to be that time pressure where you have to get out. And if you do get out, you often come back. So if you're wanting to come back, you can very easily come back. It's just a really cool experience.
And combine that with the likes of Kinosi that has the patience. That's the thing, is that you not only does the system allow you that, but you have guides like Kinosi who totally is on board. It's not when you get on the vehicle, he asks you, what do you want to do? And when you say, I want to sit with this leopard till it gets out of the tree, it's like, right, well, let's do it. I think that's what makes it so special.
Yeah. So we had 3 days where we were driving through an open area, and there's a huge big male lion sleeping off to the side. And Kinosi would say, there's a huge big male lion sleeping off to the side. And we had all 3 of us would say, that's nice. And then we would go and he would laugh and we would go and find leopards. It was amazing. And that's the thing. The guides are so accommodating to what you want as a photographer. They don't try and run your safari, whereas some places you tend to end up, the guide will ask you what you want to see, and then you don't really try and specialize or focus on that. Whereas Mashatu, that's never happened to us. What we say we want is what we go for. So speaking of Kinosi, Mashatu has 4 lodges actually now, technically, with Tuli coming into it this year. Kinosi is a guide who guides at Main Lodge and then sometimes Euphorbia. So not down a tented lodge. But have you got a favorite camp at Mashatu, and why?
So those 4 lodges, it's essentially the Main Lodge and Euphorbia are the 2 lodges sort of in the central part of Mashatu, with Euphorbia Villas being the 5-star sort of higher end lodge and in an incredibly beautiful location. And then the Mashatu Lodge, or the old main camp, is I would say slightly more basic, but still very, very nice. And then way up in the north, close to the Zimbabwean border, you've got the tented camp, and that's, I won't say it's rustic by any means, but it's a little bit cheaper, it's a little bit smaller and more intimate with safari tents. And then Tuli Safari Lodge, Mashatu, as Lance mentioned, is the newest edition of Mashatu as they've expanded, is a lovely sort of sprawling camp with big lawns right on the Limpopo River in a very different kind of habitat. It's basically very rocky sandstone surroundings. And I think for me, when it comes to favorite, there's something that I like about each of the camps. So in terms of just the location and the scenery around it, I think I actually like Tuli Safari Lodge Mashatu the most, because the location there in those sandstone ridges, without a shadow of a doubt, is the most dramatic and the most beautiful.
Stunning. Yeah.
The only problem down there is that it's a little bit harder to get to some of the best game viewing areas. So your game viewing hit rate is slightly lower, but with the added advantage that you have a chance of seeing leopards and lions on the rocks and Vero's eagles and things there that you're not going to see elsewhere in the reserve. Without a doubt, from a game viewing perspective, the easiest camps to game viewing from is from Mashatu Lodge and from Euphorbia Villas, because it takes you literally 10 to 15 minutes. You're in the central area along the Majali River. So you're essentially game viewing right from the moment that you leave camp, which is what I really, really like. Whereas at the tented camp, you've got about a half an hour, quite bumpy, rocky ride to get to the central area, but with the added advantage that it's a little bit more of a private, isolated little camp, maybe arguably with the most atmosphere in Mashatu. And again, it's a little bit cheaper, so a lot of people's going to make their decision based on the cost as opposed to just the game viewing possibilities. But having said that, if you leave early enough, you can be in the central area from the tented camp still at a good time. So I have used all those places, and what I typically try and do with my clients is, once I know what sort of level of accommodation they're happy with, I try and do at least sometime in the central area and sometime down along the sandstone ridges from Tuli Safari Lodge Mashatu.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I actually completely agree. So tented camp now, I think, is getting to the point, I hate to say this, but it's probably not worth what it costs. It's you'd say you wouldn't call it rustic. I'd call it rustic. It's they're very nice tents, but they're very plain. There's not much going on. Very cool bathrooms. I love the bathrooms. So outdoor bathrooms. It's plumbed, but it's through an old bucket, so it looks like a bucket shower. Things like that. It is very nice. And the camp is in a beautiful spot. So you're in a little valley up in the Mopani Veld. Nice pool, a beautiful deck, and dining area, things like that. But in the summertime, it's murderously hot. We've done a couple of summers in the tents. There's no aircon or anything like that. There is fans, but they just blow hotter air on you somehow after the fans heated it up a little bit more. And then you're looking at about off the top of my head, I think it's about $100 ish to upgrade to main camp. And main camp is arguably a completely different product. It's in a huge suite that is borderline bigger than most people's houses. You've got aircon, you've got amazing food. I think the next year the bar is included in all of the lodges, so that doesn't matter anymore as it used to. And then you've got 2 pools at main camp. You've also in the Mopani Veld, but with nice animals, more animals coming to the waterhole. So I would say now, if you've got the budget for tented camp, because tented camp's also gone up a lot versus when we used to go there, for a tiny little bit extra in relative terms, main camp is a much better product. And then if you've got enough money to splash out and not worry, Euphorbia is just incredible. Less people on a vehicle as well. So for photographers, we normally book a private vehicle or a photographic vehicle so that we're alone. For normal safari goers, if you are in main camp or tented camp, you are 6 people on a vehicle. Euphorbia, you're only 4. So it's a little bit easier if the other guests that you don't know maybe don't have the same ideas that you have, or that you want to target the same species. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to convince your guide where to go and what to look for. Photographers, we almost always try and get a private vehicle, so we do not have that problem at all. But that product is beautiful. That lodge is incredible. They've got this little viewing deck over the river. It's called the Nest. It's shaped like a bird's nest on the end of a walkway. Often there's elephants and things in the river down below. There's leopards that walk on those white cliffs past the Nest. So yeah, I actually haven't been to Tuli Lodge itself, but that area is incredible. So like Philly was saying, the landscapes, you have these pillars of cliffs, rocky cliffs, and we will often, on our game drives, we'll take at least one afternoon drive to go out there and just see if we can photograph anything in those cliffs with the cliffs in the background. So it's more landscape shots with some animals in it. Even if you don't get the animals, it's beautiful. So very, very different products. Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll add a link to the Mashatu website in the video description. And when you go and you look through those different lodges, you'll see that we still call it main camp because that's what the main lodge used to be called. It's actually called Mashatu Lodge now. 2 very original names, main camp and Mashatu Lodge. I don't know why they chose that. They could have been a little bit more original. I suppose Euphorbia Villas was really nice because it's built in those beautiful euphorbia trees on the cliff. But you can go and check that out. And what I highly recommend is keep an eye on the Mashatu social media pages, like on Instagram and Facebook, because what they often have are specials, like a Land of the Giants specials or low season specials. So very often during your low season months now. During your low season months, you can definitely get very, very good deals. And they also have built, I don't have all the information, but they've opened 2 self-catering camps as well in different parts of the reserve. And just important to note, though, that with those, the game viewing is probably not as good as the central area. Just because it is in Mashatu doesn't mean it's as good. It's kind of on the fringes. It's pieces of land that they've acquired quite recently. So those, I would say, are more for family getaways and groups of friends, just to be able to go to a new place and with a chance of seeing some cool stuff. But you're not necessarily going to be doing your game drives in the central area or the places that we just spoke about.
Yeah, and one's quite expensive. Colo, I think it is. Peak season's about $8,500. That's for 8 people, or up to 8 people. The other one's very cheap. Shalimpo, I think peak season's about $2,000 for up to 8 people. But like Philia says, it's not near the central game viewing area. It might take you an hour and a half to get there. If there is a sighting by that time, the sighting might be over, that type of thing. So really cool to get there and to get there cheap and to have the whole camp to yourself. But then you have to worry about food and chefs and things like that. So something always to think about.
Exactly. No, guys, Mashatu Game Reserve is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the places that you have to at least see once. Put it on your bucket list. And then I promise you, once you go, you're going to go back as often as you possibly can. I mean, Lance and I take clients there that go back with us year after year. And we really hope that, well, one or many of you that watch this episode are going to join us as well. So a reminder again that, our details are in the video description. I know for a fact, Lance, there is still some space on some of those safaris, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah. Both so 29th of May and the 15th of February. Yeah, we've still got spots left.
If I wasn't going to East Africa, I would have joined you for the February one. That's how badly I want to go. Well, listen, Lance, that brings us to arguably the most important part of this whole podcast, and that is the best Mashatu photo taken by one of us at Mashatu, as voted by you for that trophy. So last time I went first and absolutely put my foot in it. No, you went first. Did you go first?
No, I went first.
Okay, so now I've put my foot in it. So it's I'll go
So
first
you
then.
can go first.
So I am not going to make the mistake that I did last time to show you any other photos that I thought of using, and but I can honestly say, much like the last episode where we did this, this is my favorite photograph from Mashatu, and I will tell you just a little bit about the sighting. Let's see whether I can actually share my screen successfully. So the photograph that I have chosen is this one. Can you see it, Lance?
Okay. I can. I do. I like it. I do.
This photograph is of a very relaxed, quite a famous leopard in Mashatu that uses the central area close to Mashatu Lodge and Euphorbia Villas. And I led a photographic safari there last year in, I think it was July. And we had 11 nights, and on one of those afternoons, we actually found her just lying on the side of a sort of a part of a termite mound, close to a dry riverbed. And that light that you actually see on her is sunlight. It's actually the last little bit of sun hitting her, little glint in the eye. And the most remarkable thing about this shot is it was photographed with my camera on a beanbag with the R6 with a 100 to 500 millimeter lens at f7.1, which is the minimum f-stop, at, I think it was a 50th of a second. So super slow shutter speed. And what I basically did was I just put it on the timer mode, and basically just kept pressing and, and told my client on the back, to help me and just stay very, very quiet. And yeah, that's basically the shot that I was able to get, and definitely my favorite shot from Mashatu.
That is freaking stunning.
Yeah, it's a good
Hopefully it's going on a wall somewhere.
Yeah, it hasn't actually gone up yet, but you're 100% right, it should, eh? But that's the thing about Mashatu. Those are the kind of shots that Lance was talking about earlier, where there's just nothing in the way. It's just open, no grass in the way, just open landscape, and plenty opportunities to take shots like that.
Is that what's her face?
I think she's called Matswere.
Okay, so it's not what's her face.
Yeah.
My one is also a leopard, and it's of what's her face. What's old Limpy called?
Limpy is called Matoja.
Matoja, yes.
Limpy.
So mine is of Matoja.
Limpy.
So me and Matoja have a special connection because it basically means the one who limps. And up until this year, I have been the one who limps. So me and Matoja, we go back. Here we go. Right. And there it is. That is my favorite shot.
Can't see it yet. Hold on.
There's a special tree that myself and Philia have spoken about many times. And every time we go past this tree branch, and this is a tree branch which has fallen off a ginormous Mashatu tree, we always say to each other, imagine the day a leopard walks out onto this tree branch. And then we were lucky enough, this is one of the sightings where we sat for 3 hours waiting for this leopard to walk out onto this tree branch. And then I managed to snapulate this shot. And I'm not going to lie, I might have cried this day as well. It was absolutely awesome. And 5 years in the making, at least, because we have literally sat and planned and talked about this tree every single time we've gone for 5 years. We've never come close before. So the morning of this safari, as we were going back to camp, it was late, it was already 11:30. Matoja was sleeping right up the top. So we drove under, just happened to look up and saw her foot dangling down. And then I said to the guys, listen, let's make a plan. Let's come back this afternoon and let's just wait and see if she comes down. And they had also seen this branch and said like, oh, how nice would it be if a leopard had come there before we had found Matoja in the tree. So the two guys were awesome. They were like, yeah, let's absolutely do that. Kanorsi was like, you really want to just sit here the whole day? And we were like, yes. And then eventually, so we were sitting, the sun was setting, we sat again, the sun set some more, and then just after the sun had kind of left, it was just like a third of it was twinkling on the horizon, she decided to come down and she walked along this amazing branch. So yeah, this is my favorite Mashatu image, and not just because I like the picture, but I think because it means something to me. I mean, I've literally been trying for 5 years to get this shot, so it's special to me in that way. And also, I need to find a wall now to put this on.
You're going to need a big one. Well, so in the for the sake of self-preservation, I'm not going to do what I did last time and praise your shot. So it's a decent shot. Not as good as mine, but decent shot. What's quite cool is I like the fact that it's kind of switched around. Last time you had a lion portrait, I had a lion in the environment, and this time I have a leopard portrait and you have a leopard in the environment. But guys, I reckon that's a good face-off. So this is my shot. If you want to vote for me, just type a V in the comments. And this is Lance's shot. And if you want to vote for Lance, leave an L in the comments or write out our names. Just don't spell mine wrong. And I think this one's going to be a little bit closer, or at least I hope so. And by the time we do the next episode, well, hopefully we're going to be doing a nice little trophy ceremony again.
Yeah, we need a better way to present this.
It would be nice to actually do it in Mashatu, wouldn't it?
Now,
right?
Maybe we have to go back to the place each time and present.
That sounds... So if anybody wants to sponsor a trip for me and Lance to go back to do a trophy... Speaking about supporting the channel, as always, we urge you to go and check out our Patreon links in the video description. We'll have one for the Panthera Photo Safaris Conservation Fund, where basically you can make a monthly donation to help pangolin conservation, helping to remove snares from animals, or basically any animal in need in our area. Lance and Kirsten, his wife Kirsten from Panthera Photo Safaris, they use that fund to help vets and to help reserves whenever there are animals in need. And the great thing about them having those funds available, it means they can go and give immediate help when there's an animal in need. So please, if anybody wants to get involved, there isn't really a much worthier cause that I know of. And then from my side, I also have a Patreon page for the Safari Expert YouTube channel where you're watching this podcast on now. So go and check that out as well if you want to support my channel, which allows me to do this full time. And Lance, man, it's just been such a great year. I think this might very well be the last podcast of the year, but it's definitely not going to be the last one we do in total. I think you guys will also have noticed that the format will change a little bit from time to time. It all depends on how much time we have. We might not necessarily always be able to get to the Safari Shots podcast hashtag on Instagram.
But keep sending them in.
There has been hundreds and hundreds of posts, so thank you so much for that. A part of that is very much to create a community where you guys can share photographs with each other, and also where every now and again when we feel like talking about it, you and I can maybe pick and choose a photograph and chat about it a little bit more. So please don't stop sharing your photographs there basically to grow the community.
And remember, if you've got questions, send them. We're here. We see them most of the time. Some of the videos, we struggle if we're away, like we've been away a lot this time. But if you have any specific questions, specific topics, things you want to know, it could be about Mashatu, it could be about Matabole last time, but yeah, it could be about anywhere. If you've got specific questions, fire them through.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope all of you, if you celebrated, have a very Merry Christmas, have a wonderful New Year, and may 2024 be a very successful and productive safari year, and also with everything else that you're doing. Thanks so much for joining us. Lance, thank you so much for joining me today, as always, and until
thanks very much.
2024.
Ooh.
Pew, 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 pew. Boop, boop, boop. Boop, 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 boop.
We really need to work on an outro.